The idea that humans could become angels is not just a modern curiosity. It reaches deep into humanity's spiritual past, where the line between human souls and celestial beings was not always so distinct. In many ancient traditions, including those predating Christianity, beings of great wisdom and virtue could ascend into divine roles. Stories from Babylon, Egypt, and Greece describe mortals who were lifted into the heavens, transformed into stars, or elevated into the status of gods or messengers of the divine. In Mesopotamian myths, human kings and priests could enter sacred roles after death, acting as intermediaries between the gods and the living. Egyptian lore speaks of pharaohs becoming divine upon death, their spirits joining the pantheon of sky beings. In Greek thought, heroes like Heracles achieved immortality and divine placement after their earthly trials. While these weren't called angels in the way we use the term today, they were elevated beings with power, wisdom, and a role in the divine order. Judaism, from which Christianity emerged, had a more defined structure regarding heavenly beings. Angels were clearly set apart from humans. In Hebrew scriptures, angels are messengers of God, created before humanity and not subject to death. However, there are stories that blur the lines. Enoch, a righteous man from Genesis, is said in later Jewish texts like 1 Enoch to have been transformed into the archangel Metatron. This idea, while never canonized, persisted in mystical Jewish traditions like the Kabbalah. The prophet Elijah also complicates the line. Taken to heaven in a chariot of fire, Elijah never dies in the conventional sense. Later Jewish and Christian traditions envision him as a being who still operates in divine affairs, almost angelic in nature. Though not officially classified as an angel, Elijah's story sparked centuries of speculation. Early Christians inherited these ideas and added their own layers. The New Testament draws a clear distinction between humans and angels. Hebrews 1 verse 14 describes angels as ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. Yet in Matthew 22 verse 30, Jesus says that after resurrection, people will be like the angels in heaven, referring to their immortality and spiritual nature. The phrasing is open to interpretation. Are we like angels in function, in substance, or simply in that we no longer marry or die? Church fathers like Origen and Gregory of Nyssa pondered deeply about human transformation. Origen believed the soul's destiny was to ascend toward God through stages of purification and learning. While he didn't claim humans literally became angels, he saw no firm boundary between types of spiritual beings. Gregory suggested the human soul could climb from glory to glory, moving ever closer to the divine. By the time Christianity became more institutionalized, such mystical interpretations became risky. The Church needed order. It drew firm lines between angels and humans. Angels were pure spirit, created for God's purposes. Humans were embodied souls, fallen but redeemable. The resurrection promised transformation, yes, but not a change in species. Still, ambiguity lingered. Saints were often described with angelic traits. Their incorrupt bodies, their visions, their voices in the wilderness suggested they were more than just human. In art, they were given halos, wings in some medieval paintings, and placed in the company of seraphim and cherubim. Monastic communities, especially in the deserts of Egypt and Syria, cultivated lives that mirrored angels. The desert fathers and mothers spoke of spiritual battles, fasting, and prayers as ways to become like the angels. Some early monks saw themselves not just imitating the heavenly hosts, but entering their ranks. Their goal was to become angelic men, shedding the desires of the flesh and aligning with the will of God. Mystics throughout Christian history carried this idea forward. Hildegard of Bingen, Catherine of Siena, and others wrote of heavenly visions where souls shimmered with light, moved freely through the celestial spheres, and worshipped at the throne like angels. Some even recorded being told by divine voices that holy souls could take on tasks usually assigned to angels. Outside the institutional church, in Gnostic texts and other apocryphal writings, we find bolder claims. The Gospel of Thomas and other non-canonical books suggest that deep knowledge and spiritual awakening can lift the soul beyond its earthly state. In these writings, the line between angel and awakened human dissolves entirely. The soul is seen as a divine spark temporarily housed in flesh, and through enlightenment, it returns to its true home and nature. These ideas were condemned as heresy, but they never truly disappeared. They lingered in hidden teachings, mystical sects, and whispered traditions passed through generations. Today, the question still stirs something deep within. Can humans become angels? While most official doctrines say no, the legacy of thought across centuries suggests the answer is more complicated. Whether through symbolic transformation, divine assignment, or spiritual evolution, the idea that a human could transcend their nature and enter into the ranks of heaven's messengers remains one of the most profound and haunting mysteries of the faith. The idea that humans might transform into angels after death is a common belief in popular culture, but this notion has no firm foundation in mainstream Christian theology. Still, the boundary between humans and angels isn't as rigid in some theological traditions as it may appear. Certain saints and mystics throughout history have reported visions in which the souls of the righteous seem to take on radiant or exalted forms, almost angelic in appearance or demeanor. These visions, while not doctrinal proof, have fueled centuries of speculation. The writings of early church fathers occasionally dipped into this mystery. Origen, a 3rd century theologian, once suggested that all souls were originally equal in the eyes of God and that the distinctions we now recognize, angels, humans, demons, were the result of each soul's choices and spiritual development. Though later condemned as heretical by the Church, Origen's ideas demonstrate that not all early thinkers saw the lines between celestial beings and human souls as immutable. In Orthodox Christianity, there is a notion of theosis, becoming more like God, which could potentially align with the idea of spiritual elevation. While theosis doesn't equate to becoming an angel, it does speak to the soul's journey toward divine likeness. Could this divine likeness be mistaken for angelic form in spiritual visions? Some mystics have said yes. Then there's the Catholic concept of beatification and canonization. Saints, once in heaven, are often thought to intercede for the living, appearing in dreams, apparitions, or visions. While these figures are not classified as angels, they seem to act with a similar mission, guiding, warning, or protecting humanity. Over time, their spiritual presence and perceived authority can start to blur the lines between saintly intercessor and angelic guardian. There are also biblical figures whose lives or ascensions stir this debate. Enoch, who walked with God, and was taken up into heaven without tasting death, is later described in the Book of Enoch as having been transformed into the archangel Metatron. Though not accepted as canon by the Vatican, the Book of Enoch carries weight in Ethiopian Christianity and mystic traditions. If Enoch, a human, could become a being like Metatron in extra-biblical texts, what does that suggest about humanity's potential? Similarly, Elijah was taken into heaven in a fiery chariot. Though not described explicitly as transforming into an angel, the mystery of his ascent left room for endless interpretations. His return is prophesied in Malachi and again referenced in the New Testament, linking him to supernatural purpose even after his departure from earthly life. Art and literature, heavily influenced by theology and folklore, often portray deceased children or saints with wings, harps, and radiant halos. These depictions, while not doctrinal, have deeply embedded themselves in collective consciousness. Funeral sermons might comfort mourners by saying their loved one is watching over them like an angel. The metaphor may not be theologically precise, but it reflects a longing to believe in a posthumous transformation into something divine and protective. Medieval mysticism takes this a step further. Figures like Hildegard of Bingen or Julian of Norwich spoke of elevated souls who exist in proximity to the angelic host. While these writings are symbolic and often poetic, they offer a vision of human souls transcending their former limitations, becoming radiant, timeless, and full of divine purpose. It's also worth noting that across history, the Church has had to balance orthodox teachings with popular beliefs. In certain cultures, folk Christianity developed its own mythologies about angels, saints, and the afterlife. These stories sometimes include humans ascending into the heavenly hierarchy, becoming angelic in name if not in substance. Then there's the apocalyptic literature, both canonical and apocryphal, that expands on the celestial order. In these texts, the universe is often structured in hierarchies and spiritual realms. While angels maintain their own distinct orders, seraphim, cherubim, thrones, and so on, some writings suggest a kind of cosmic promotion system, where spiritual enlightenment could elevate one's position even after death. In summary, while Orthodox Christian theology generally maintains a distinction between angels and humans, the spiritual literature, visions of mystics, and the ambiguous cases of Enoch and Elijah suggest a more fluid boundary. Part 3 will explore how this question continues to evolve in modern theology and how the Vatican addresses, or avoids, this complex and often emotional subject. In the final part of our exploration into the question of whether humans can become angels, we must confront both historical theology and modern spiritual interpretation. It's a subject the Church has approached with caution, acknowledging certain truths while carefully guarding doctrinal boundaries. The modern fascination with angels has shifted dramatically from ancient theology to a more personal, almost sentimental realm. People speak of loved ones becoming their guardian angels after death. Films, memorials, and popular phrases like "heaven gained another angel" show how this belief has taken root in everyday consciousness. But does this idea hold any theological merit, or is it a comforting metaphor? Catholic doctrine is clear: angels are a separate order of creation. They are purely spiritual beings who do not possess physical bodies. Humans, on the other hand, are both body and soul. According to traditional teachings, we do not transform into angels upon death, but instead await bodily resurrection. Even in beatific vision, the soul's union with God, our essence remains human. But while this separation is official doctrine, it hasn't stopped mystics and saints from contemplating something more mysterious. Take St. Thomas Aquinas, known as the angelic doctor, who emphasized that while angels and humans differ in nature, both serve divine purposes in unique ways. However, Aquinas also acknowledged the potential for human souls to rise in hierarchy and take on spiritual tasks in the afterlife. Not as angels per se, but as glorified beings with extraordinary roles. In some apocryphal and mystical writings, we see even bolder ideas. The Book of Enoch, revered in early Christianity though excluded from the canon, describes the transformation of Enoch into the archangel Metatron. This concept, while outside mainstream theology, reflects a hidden undercurrent in ancient thought, that the boundary between divine and mortal isn't as rigid as later dogma would make it. The Eastern Orthodox tradition also contains esoteric references to deification, or theosis, where humans become partakers of the divine nature. It doesn't mean turning into angels, but it implies a transformation so profound that distinctions blur. The soul, stripped of sin and ego, becomes radiant, divine-like, eternal, and luminous. The mystics often describe saints as angelic, not in species, but in function and essence. In the writings of Hildegard of Bingen and other visionary saints, humans who achieve sanctity are said to dwell with angels and carry out duties similar to theirs: guidance, intercession, protection. These poetic insights may not equate to a change in metaphysical category, but they imply a fluidity of roles in heaven that the institutional church has never fully endorsed, but never completely denied either. Even within Vatican documents, there's nuance. While firmly teaching that angels and humans are separate, the Church leaves room for mystery. The Catechism, for instance, speaks of the communion of saints, where the faithful departed intercede for the living. This intercession closely mirrors what angels are said to do. Interestingly, some exorcists and mystics have claimed that certain souls of the righteous manifest as radiant beings during spiritual battles. Are these symbolic visions? Or glimpses into a deeper, unwritten theology that recognizes a shared cosmic mission between humans and angels? Modern theologians often walk a careful line. They affirm that human beings retain their humanity in the afterlife, yet many acknowledge that the beatific vision changes the soul in unimaginable ways. Perhaps we don't become angels in name or nature, but in light, love, and service. Ultimately, what people mean when they say someone has become an angel is not usually theological. It's emotional, symbolic, and filled with longing. They mean their loved one is close, protective, and part of the unseen world. While the Church might not validate the statement literally, it doesn't actively fight it either. Sometimes, silence is the gentlest acknowledgement of a truth too delicate to define. So, can humans become angels? Not in doctrine, but in mystery? Perhaps. Perhaps we're not meant to become angels, but to become what angels point to: beings of purpose, light, and love who serve the divine in ways beyond understanding. Thanks for watching Shadow Files. If this story made you question what truths lie hidden in spiritual silence, hit subscribe and step deeper into the unknown. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your mind in the shadows.